I think my colleagues know what's coming, but barriers, I mean, colonial capitalist, heteropatriarchal, white supremacy, and anti-Black racism. Those systems of power, to me, it creates the conditions that are those barriers that have been mentioned when it comes to safety, right? I grew up along the Jordan River and trying to imagine and remember when it was Piauigue and reimagining that even to this day, because it's like, that's nice, it's right there, but when you outdoors is polluted, you know, what kind of safety are we talking about and for who? When we think about other concerns of safety of, you know, if you're going to encounter any danger, well, how much of that has to do with people's needs not being met in our society? I recently moved back to where I grew up. I grew up in Rose Park and just moved back. I was living in Aotearoa, New Zealand for almost a decade. And it was really interesting experiencing a place that is different from here. It's a, you know, a smaller population, so it's easier to manage in some ways, but it's a lot more socialist in terms of their policies. And so there's a lot more safety nets. And so there was less concern. It was kind of like when I was growing up, like you had less concern of safety and different things because there's social safety nets there for people, for community. There's protections for air, for place, for the way you operate. And it's not perfect. There's a lot of issues there. There's still a lot of issues around displacement of Indigenous peoples too. But we'd always joke, me and my partner with our kids, we're like, hey, it's like we went from one place and now here it's like free-range children all over again because it wasn't the same apprehension. And again, not perfect, but again, thinking about what is it that makes things safe or unsafe? What are the conditions that have led us to this moment that has created that division and separation, right? The worldview in and of itself that separated nature from civilization to begin with, who is where along those lines, and then the inherited legacy that we have now. And so for me, like, yeah, those systems of power, we have to remain, you know, at tension with that and imagine beyond that and confront that at the same time.
I do indeed. Oh, how can you speak to that, Brian?
I think I would talk a little bit about like connected with Jonny was also saying, like also connected with what Danielle was saying, like I agree with like everything that Danielle said. Like I think like it's the safety part of it, when you think about like safety in terms of like other humans, like being afraid of that, like that's what I saw growing up too, like the fear of like getting hurt or like being kind of like, there were like, I grew up in stores where two people went camping and ended up murdered and things like that. Like I don't want to bring the whole room down, but like just saying like when you hear those things, because yeah, I grew up in a place that like the structure of the society and like the structure of like the economic system and like everything created those situations. But I also think when I think of barriers, besides that, I think about some things like Jonny was mentioning of like, sometimes not having access to like transportation to go to those places for playing because there's that separation, right? Like there are like those parks, right? The parks that are like great for going, but like what if there were places more accessible to communities that are like closer to be able to play? But as I say, like sometimes those are not available or they're being polluted in many ways. And they're usually in areas where like the population is more marginalized, right? So I see that as an issue. I also see like working with like the group, just to give some context, I work with a group that Jonny used to work with that's called Youth Teaching Youth at a museum. And we work with the Glendale community. So lots of our students, like they had told me like, I would never be able to go to National Park if it wasn't for YTY. I would never be able to do those things if it wasn't for this program. And it's not because like they don't care about nature or because of like, I don't know, electronics. It's because of like, yeah, access. It's not only like food or like those other things. It's also about like health as well. Like, so it's like some of my students don't have like access to like a health insurance. So like if they're like on the park and they hurt themselves, like they need like to go to hospital or something, like who's gonna like help with that, you know? Also other things that I think of is like having access to like gear, you know, like I took students to food trips that are like, I had to bring like other coats and like beanies and like things because like it's cold outside and like then they'll have access to like, I'm sorry to do like health and like that don't have any critics outdoorsy community, but they know like those really fancy outdoor stuff, like some people don't have access to that, and then you end up like wearing like shoes that are gonna get wet outside, you know. So I think all of those things create some barriers as well, and also create an idea of like a culture of outdoorsy that it ends up sometimes being a little bit more privileged or like classist. Again, like I love going outside. It's not a critic to that. It's just like it creates an idea of like, oh, this is not for me because I don't have the necessary ear or like resources. So, and I think the work that we try to do is like trying to give access and create that connection with those places. So, yeah.
Just before, yeah, Jonny?
Sure, just thinking about the initial question about how we face those challenges. Another big part of work that I think is meaningful, and especially hearing about it from you two separately, reframing what it means to think about nature. I frequently mention that with youth of, knowing plants outside, that's nature too. That is right around you. It's around your home in some capacity. My background's in entomology, so there are insects everywhere. And I always say everyone has an insect story. So everyone can share something about that, whether it's hate insects, whether you love them, there's a story there. So I think reframing what we conceptualize as nature is a big part of it too.
Just even nature right in our backyard. Do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah. So, after I dropped the bomb, I was all right, we'll do some responses. Yeah, I think one of the things that we've been working on here in the organization, and particularly with programming at the Nature Center, is reframing, like confronting those systems of power and how we have inherited this language, right? Nature, wilderness, who belongs where, what does it mean? And interrogating that origin, but then also like bringing in different perspectives, right? Not just diversifying the face of the current status quo, but challenging the status quo in and of itself to diversify its approach altogether. Whether that's through indigenous ecological knowledge, whether that's through anti-racist work, and thinking about how to make things relevant to people, right? Like I know for me, even to this day, like I'm working in a conservation organization, but still I have to like consciously think about, all right, where do I fit in it because of that lingering kind of like what you were mentioning, what's for me, where do I see myself, where do I not? I usually always have to explain my perspective, where I'm coming from, my background, my worldview, rather than being able to take that for granted. And so I think that's part of the work that we've been doing as well, kind of be responsive to that. And that nature is everywhere, that we are nature, we're a part of it, and remembering that, right? It's not a new thing, but remembering it, remembering where it came from, and honoring that legacy, right? And particularly here, right? Indigenous ecological knowledge, we're very much an Indian country in Utah, right? 8 federally recognized native nations, huge urban indigenous population, and then we add the global indigenous population here, and it's even bigger. And so we just have to stop ignoring that, and it have to come into relation with that again.
I really appreciate y'all for giving us those reminders that, holding events and during the year. I've been participating in a lot of like Color the Wasatch and like BIPOC river trips and outdoor Afro events. And every time they provide that gear, it just makes it more and more accessible. And just having conversations on cost and having funders come and support the work, because those barriers are real and there's reframing conversations that need to be had and all of that work. And then it allows people to connect to those benefits of connecting to nature and enjoying nature play. We got one more question for you all. And so what is one thing you would like people who are designing play spaces or facilitating play experiences to consider? I'm gonna let y'all go. Whoever wants to go first.
Okay, I think like what we're just mentioning of providing gear, providing training, and I think providing different perspectives. I think like connected to what Daniel was saying, like showing that there's like maybe not only one culture of being like outside and connecting with nature, that there are many cultures and many ways to do that. Also, when speaking of like my perspective, like talking about education and science, like there are many perspectives for science. We have like we say at the museum at Constantine, Kate is gonna know that STEM is rooted in culture. So like science, all the perspectives of science, like it's not only the Western science. We do like science, we believe in science, but like there are many ways of knowledge. There are many like culture, like indigenous cultures have like a lot of like to share, and we have a lot to learn in their perspective and their way of teaching science. Many cultures from like other places, and I speak about that because the students from like that I work with come from many regions, as I come from another region as well. So I think like bringing those perspectives is good. And if you're gonna work with like children or like teens, I think like having them participate in the process of creation or planning is extremely important, because the sense of belonging is like most powerful things. I have to say that. And like being part of planning something, being part of like, or being able to share, it's extremely like powerful, and helps them being part of like, oh, this is not made for me, this isn't by me, and it's like I'm part of this. So yeah, I think that would be my.
Thank you.